Today, I want to take you on a quick tour through the world of Zen. As we said last week, Zazen, the Japanese word for seated meditation, from the Chinese word chan, from the Sanskrit word dhyana. The emigration from India to Japan through China and Southeast Asia has so many wonderful stories and legends attached to it, but for today, suffice it to say that practitioners of Zen trace their lineage back to the Buddha himself, who sat unmoved under the tree of enlightenment when he received his awakening. Then, through his disciple Mahakashyapa, who alone of his disciples understood the Buddha's true meaning. Then, 28 generations later, to China by Master Bodhidharma in the 6th century. Then, through Southeast Asia and up to Japan by Eisei, Dogen, and Kaizen in the 12th and 13th centuries. The roots of Zen begin near the end of the Buddha's life, according to the legends in the transmission of the lamp. He took his disciples to a pond, sat in their midst as was his custom, and they waited silently for him to give them a teaching. But instead of speaking, he reached into the pond, pulled up a lotus flower with its root dripping mud and water. The Buddha just held the flower there. Then after a while, he arose, walked to each disciple in turn, held the lotus flower before each one. His disciples were confused, not knowing what to make of their master's behavior, each one trying to expound on its symbolism or meaning, when, as he stood before the last one, that disciple, Mahakashyapa, smiled. The Buddha handed him the lotus and said, "What I have said, I have given to you all. What cannot be said, I have given to Mahakashyapa." From that day on, Mahakashyapa was acknowledged as the Buddha's rightful successor. And in true Zen fashion, this story was passed down to successive Buddhist generations very simply. Pick up flower, subtle smile. 28 generations later, it was the semi-legendary 6th century Indian prince turned monk, Bodhidharma, who brought Zen to China, the first Chinese patriarch of Chan. There were Buddhist teachers in China before Bodhidharma, but he was the first to introduce the teachings of Zen there. There are many stories about him, but one, the Bodhidharma traveled to a nearby Shaolin monastery, and after 9 years of proving his worthiness, in 527, he's called TAO in Chinese, he was welcomed there, and he slowly transformed their religious practice from spending hours bent over translating Sanskrit texts to undergoing various physical disciplines, physical trainings, which resulted in the creation of Shaolin Kung Fu. Much of his fame comes from his famous 4-line teaching, the primacy of experience over scripture, the primacy of experience over language itself. A special transmission outside scriptures, not depending on words and letters, directly pointing to mind, seeing into one's true nature, attaining Buddhahood. From China, Chan went to Vietnam in 580, then to Korea and Japan around the 12th century. In Japan, 2 main schools of Chan, now Zen, developed. The first, the Rinzai school, founded by Master Eisei, and that emphasizes the experience of sudden awakening, satori, aha, through direct experience, rationality, through direct experience, through the practice of Zen arts until the rational thoughts are broken. It's the antithesis of rationality. And second, the Soto school, founded by Dogen Zenji, concentrates on the life and teachings of the Buddha as one engages in the daily practice of sitting, shikitanza, serene reflection, gradual advancement in enlightenment without expecting anything particularly extraordinary to happen. The Rinzai school, sudden awakening. The Soto tradition, gradual advancement in enlightenment. Both Japanese traditions subscribe to the Zen philosophical notion of wabi-sabi, difficult to translate into English. Wabi means simple elegance. Sabi means taking pleasure in the imperfect. So wabi-sabi is a way of life that appreciates complexity in simplicity, or beauty in imperfection. Wabi-sabi celebrates authenticity, reality, the way things are, not the way we think things should be. It is summarized, nothing less, nothing is finished, nothing is perfect. So these virtues are cultivated. Kanzo, simplicity. Fukinsai, asymmetry. Shibumi, beauty in the understated. Shizen, natural spontaneity. Yugen, subtle grace. Datsukozoku, freedom from convention. Seijaku, tranquil energy. Rinzai Zen believes that since everyone already has Buddha nature, you can cultivate the right conditions to bring about a sudden burst of insight. Aha, satori, of what is already there within you. The mind is a meaning-making machine. It interprets experience with words, stories, images through a prism of prejudices and predispositions. A prism becomes a prison of systems, logic, ideologies, dogmas. The architect could be Jesus, Buddha, the Dalai Lama, the Einstein, Maslow. Pick your own architect, and it can be decorated as ornately and as beautifully as you'd like, and it can be as small or as big as an inclusive as you'd like. But it's still a prison, the mind. A golden cage is still a cage. Zazen means seated meditation. It does not mean reflection or concentration that takes an object. It is sunyata, a state of no concentration, no mind, no ripple in the pond of consciousness, reflecting without distortion, interpretation. It's pure consciousness. It's mu. One of my very favorite poems of Rumi. Zero is where the real fun starts. Everywhere else, people are counting. Runners and athletes, they get this right in the zone. Ted Williams was once asked what was his secret to hitting, and he said, the pitcher throws the ball, I swing the bat, I hit the ball. Writers, musicians, other artists, they get it too. It happens through me. Emptiness that's full. Your true self is like a rose, stripping away the petals of the rose, One by one, deeper and deeper you go until you pull off the final petal where you find nothing at all but for the sweet smell of the rose that still lingers. And the Zen arts, let me just say a word about a few of them and tell you a few stories along the way. The Gateless Gate is a collection of koans compiled in the 13th century. The Great Path has no gates. Thousands of roads enter it. When one passes through this gateless gate, he walks freely between heaven and earth. And the slide at the bottom here is one of my very favorite places to go and just sit and reflect. It's the Episcopal Church, the Roofless Church in New Harmony, Indiana. Koans are not puzzles that can be solved. They cannot be solved. They must be dissolved. Sudden insight, aha, born of discomfort, Kensho. An assault on rationality, on duality, on the gods of interpretation of experience we create, of meaning making out of the experience. Let's be real. We human beings are meaning makers. We have to make meaning in order to understand, in order to survive, in order to make sense of the world, in order to control our environments, in order to live. But koans, like all the Zen arts, try to take us to that nanosecond, that slice of time between the experience and our minds making meaning of the experience. And in that place, that space, to set us free for aha. Not sight, but insight, sheer experience, pure consciousness. Or as Frederick Lenz said, the shortest distance between 2 points is your mind. Samadhi. Some of the more famous koans. What is the sound of one hand clapping? What did your face look like before your parents were born? If you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Who is the Buddha? Many answers have been given over the centuries. A dead teacher, the thingness of a thing, a walking stick, a smile, a circle. A monk once asked his teacher, Uman, who is the Buddha? And Uman answered, a dried piece of dung. And Christians know about koans too, so-called Jesus koans from the New Testament. Let the dead bury the dead. Or, unless you hate your mother and father, you cannot come to me, and others. And the famous koan from Chado, from the Japanese Zen tea ceremony. Before enlightenment, a bowl is a bowl and tea is tea. During enlightenment, a bowl is more than a bowl and tea is more than tea. After enlightenment, a bowl is a bowl and tea is tea, which is very similar to that other great Zen koan. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. And Kyudo, Zen archery, originally intended for medieval Japanese nobility, now practiced as one of the Zen disciplines. Each step in the process taken mindfully, intentionally. Ashibumi, placing your footing. Dozukuri, finding your body's balance. Yugame, stringing the bow, placing the arrow. Kai, drawing the bow. Hanari, effortless release, like releasing the clutch of a manual transmission, that magic point where it's released and the engine kicks in. Zen Shin, placing oneself in the shot. 3 stages of consciousness. Oteki, the arrow hits the target. Kanteki, the arrow pierces the target. Zaiteki, you exist in the target. Friends, what if ego is the target? Archer, arrow, target, one. No self. Which reminds us, of course, of Bujutsu, the so-called martial arts. Karate Do, the way of the empty hand, training in self-discipline to master the inner conflict caused by unruly ego. Judo, the gentle way, with its principles, maximum efficiency, minimum effort, mutual welfare and benefit, softness controls hardness. Aikido, way of merging with the life force, or the way of the harmonious spirit. The goal of these defensive techniques is, quote, according to its founder, true victory, lasting triumph over ego, here, now. And that do at the end of each one, right, is the Japanese version of the TAO, the way, not a belief system, but the way that one walks, on the way. And haiku, an economy of syllables, a protest against the noise we substitute for communication. While silence is the best language of all, haiku, the traditional form of Japanese poetry, comes close. 17 syllables, 575, that contains kareji, cutting words in classical poetry, a caesura, where we get cesarean procedure, what we might call in our day a CT scan, a CAT scan, focusing our attention so that we can fully experience this slice of time, to be in the moment, a slice of experience that usually contains images of nature. The most famous haiku, of course, comes from the 17th century Japanese poet Basho. An ancient pond. A frog jumps in. Splash! Some other famous haiku. Lady Butterfly perfumes her wings, floating over the orchid. Short summer night, a dewdrop on a hairy caterpillar. I feel a longing for my father before he was born. My old thighs, how thin in the firelight. Adding father's name to the family tombstone with room for my own. And then one of my own. Bone-chilling winter cold, peering through scarecrow fingers. Glow, silvery moon. Satori. Aha. Sudden awakening. The experience of sunyata. A state of no mind, no concentration, where the ripple in the pond of consciousness is stilled, simply reflecting reality without distortion, without interpretation. Pure consciousness. Mu. Two final stories. In medieval Japan, three 14-year-old boys came to their teacher for their lesson. Roshi asked the boys to meditate for the day. How old is the Buddha? The first one calculated from the date of the Buddha's birth and said 1,850 years old. The second boy answered, the Buddha is timeless. The third boy answered, he is 14 years old. And my favorite, a man was walking across a field and began to be chased by a tiger. He ran and he ran until he reached a cliff, and having nowhere else to go, he grabbed a vine and lowered himself over the side of the cliff, away from the outstretched paws of the tiger. When all of a sudden he saw more tigers below him, leaping up the side of the cliff, tigers above, tigers below. And if that wasn't bad enough, he saw two little mice, a black mouse and a white mouse, gnawing on the vine to which he clung, the only thing keeping him from certain death. They gnawed and they nibbled, and right at the moment when it appeared the vine would break, he noticed a wild strawberry growing off the cliff wall, a bright, voluptuous, deep red strawberry. And right then, the vine began to break. He lunged, he plucked the berry with his other hand and plopped it into his mouth. And as he began to fall, he thought, oh my, never before did anything taste so sweet.